All right. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining me. We'll go ahead and get started here. If you got your questions, go ahead and post them. It's going to be below the video if you are on a smaller screen, like a mobile device, or on a larger screen, like a desktop, laptop, computer, something like that. It'll be to the right of the video. So I start with questions that were asked up to an hour before. So I'll be starting here with Brian P. So if you happen to be on here earlier and push your question more than an hour ago, no worries. Just copy and paste your question in there. The reason why I start with questions that were asked up to an hour before is I want to try to answer questions for people who I think are here waiting to see their questions get answered. So let's take a look at Brian P's question here. So hi Q, earlier this week you were talking about how to grip the club with the left hand, RHG. Not sure. Right-handed golfer. I'm guessing that's what he means. I've always gripped the club so that it rests in the crease between the middle of my left hand, but you seem to be showing it higher up, closer to the middle finger, to the little finger. Can you please go over this again? So basically, the way you want to grip it in your lead hand, so right-handed, left-handed golfer, the way you want to grip it is you want to have this pad of your hand on top of the club, right? So that basically puts the club through, there's a crease on your hand here and here, puts it going through there, and then a little bit into your hand a little bit. So it's in there at a little bit of a diagonal, kind of like that. And then your pad goes right on top of it like that. So basically, you should be able to hold the club up like this, right? If you have it in the lifeline of your hand, right, and it kind of sounds like that's what you're describing, through the crease like this, that's going to be too much in the hand, and you're going to tend to, one, you're going to have a hard time hinging the club, and two, you're going to tend to naturally want to stand up to kind of throw this club. So you want it to be kind of a little bit in the fingers, a little bit in the hand, kind of going diagonally across like that, this pad down on there, and then with your trail hand, the lifeline of your hand, the pad between the pads here, so that crease that's created between the pads there, that's going to go right on top of or on the side of the thumb there. So you can be right on top of it like that, or you can be a little bit more on the side of it. But either way, you kind of want it to be more kind of like that, right? And whether you use overlap, interlock, overlap, or 10 finger, it's really personal preference. If you're someone who doesn't have a lot of strength, so you're a junior, maybe you have some arthritis, maybe you have some smaller hands and you just don't have a lot of strength in your hands, you may benefit from more of a 10 finger grip because you're going to be able to put more force into the handle. But if you do have some speed, then I would definitely recommend more of an overlap, interlock kind of grip, because it's going to be a lot easier to get shaft lean and things like that with a grip like that. All right. So Brian, let me know if you have any further questions about the grip. But that's basically, the easiest way to think about it is this pad goes on top, this finger cups underneath, trail hand thumb goes right on top of that. It can be on the side of it a little bit or on top, but basically it's going on the thumb, right? And then you take the hands around it just like that. And then going on here, Terry G asks, how do you impart spin on chip shots? My chips all run past the target with no spin. So if you want spin, you need to have loft, right? So I'd make sure you use a lofted club. So you're going to get more spin with a 60 degree or 56 degree than you are with a than with like an 8-iron. So if you're chipping with an 8-iron, don't expect to get spin. It's typically gonna roll out. If you're chipping with a pitching wedge, it will typically roll out. You need something, a higher lofted wedge, like a 56 degree, 60 degrees, something like that, to be able to get some good spin on it. You can get good spin on, lower lofted clubs like a pitching wedge and things like that, but there's not enough speed in a chip shot to put spin on that. You can get spin on that on a shot that's a full swing, right, where it gets way up in the air and comes down, has some spin on it. But on a short shot like this, there's just not enough force. There's not enough speed to be able to get that ball to spin. But you need more loft to be able to do that. So loft would be the first thing. The second thing would be a clean strike. It has to be a clean strike. If you're getting any moisture on the face, right? So if you're hitting any of the ground before the golf ball, that's going to get moisture and debris in the face, which is going to make the ball slip on the face and not spin. So it has to be very, very clean, clicky kind of contact. If you watch PGA, tournaments or professional tournaments on TV, you'll watch when they hit chips with their wedges, it's a click. It's a very distinct click sound. That's straight ball on face contact. If you're not hearing that kind of click kind of sound and you're hearing more of a muffled, kind of sound, I mean, you're definitely getting something between the face and the ball that's going to make it slip on the face and you're not going to get spin, right? So those would be the things that I would look at. Make sure that your face is clean. That's a big thing. If you have anything on your face that can make the ball slip on the face, then you'll want to make sure that that's out there. Make sure that your grooves are clean, because if you do happen to get a little bit of moisture or debris in the face, it will go into the grooves instead of staying on the face and making the ball slip on there. So it will help add a little bit of spin. That's what the grooves are for, is to displace water, moisture, and debris. And if you're playing in very wet conditions, I would expect to get less spin, because it's going to be very, very difficult to get spin when you're playing in dewy kind of conditions or soggy, wet conditions. Also, if you're in a lie that is not going to allow you to get ball only contact, meaning if you're in the fairway, maybe you're in some fluffy fairway or you're in the rough, you're not going to get a lot of spin out of those, because there's going to be grass getting between the ball and the face, which is going to lower the amount of spin. So typically you're only going to be able to get a lot of spin if you have a very clean lie. The most spin is going to be like a very firm and dry and thin kind of lie, where it's a very tight kind of lie. That's when you're going to get a lot of spin. And that's a lot of the lies that tour players see when they're hitting a wedge out of the fairway, or when they're hitting kind of a chip shot around the greens, and you see they get a lot of spin on it. Well, they have a lie that allows them to do that, right? Firm, fast, dry, tight conditions. Most of our municipal courses, I don't know where you play, Terry, but maybe you play a course that isn't kept as well as a PGA caliber kind of course. I know I don't play PGA caliber courses myself, and I run into I don't run into a ton of tight lies like that where you can get a ton of spin. So you got to understand the conditions that you're in. But the main thing is loft, clean strike. That's how you get the spin on there. So if you're looking to make sure that your technique is good, I'd recommend working through our chipping mastery courses and our wedge mastery courses. They're going to help you to make sure that your technique is good, so that way you can get that clean contact. I'm not going to go through all of that here, but that's something that's included with your membership. We have these courses so that way you can work through to get there. So just basic technique, ball basically in the middle of the face or middle of the stance, face a little bit open. That's going to add a little bit more loft and make things a little bit easier. Now I'm just coming in nice and shallow, kind of just brushing the turf and trying to make sure that I make ball first, or as much ball only contact as you can, and that should help you to get some good spin. So Ali S says, any feedback on Phil Kenyon Golf Academy? If it were suggested as one of your affiliate, is it worth the price? I personally have not done any of the Phil Kenyon stuff. I think Clay has done some of it. I haven't talked to him about it, though. But Phil Kenyon works with a lot of tour players, and he's considered one of the best putting coaches out there. So I would say, I don't know how much it is, but I would say, if he's putting something out there, it's probably pretty good. I haven't looked into it. I haven't, tested or talked to Clay about it. I will say that we don't put our, I think that we do have some sort of affiliate thing with them. But I will say that we don't put our name on something or have an affiliate thing if it's not something that we think is actually going to help our members. So I can't say personally that I vetted it, but I imagine Clay has vetted it. And like I said, we don't associate ourselves with things that are bad, right? So we could have an affiliate deal with everything if we wanted to, right? We could peddle every single training aid to you and make probably lots of money, doing that. But we only, 95% of the training aids out there, people send them to us and they want us to do a review or tell our members about it or whatever. And we only show you the ones that we think that are good, right? We don't even bother with the ones that aren't any good. So odds are if we're not talking about it, then then it's probably not something that we've tested or think that's any good. Now, there's definitely things out there that we haven't tested everything or looked at everything. But the things that we have tested and we think are good, we present to you all and give you the opportunity to use it or hear what we think about it. So if Clay says it's good, that I would say, usually me and Clay are on the same page with this stuff. So I would say it's good, but personally, I have not looked into it or looked at any of the stuff that he has on there. I follow him on Instagram, and I do see a lot of good stuff that he posts on there. So I agree with a lot of the main things that he says that are really, really important for putting. So yeah, I would say, like I said, I don't know how much it is, but I would say it's probably, if you're looking for some putting help, that would be a place I would think it would be a good avenue to go into. All right. So next question is from Joseph B. Joseph B says, "Hey, Q-Man, why is my follow through so short? Also, don't seem to get near parallel on the backswing, and occasionally I hit great and finish like Michelle Wee." So a lot of things there. So why is your follow through so short? I'd have to see your swing to know for sure. But typically, when I see folks with a short follow through, it's because they're not shifting their weight properly to their lead side, and they're keeping their trail leg kind of anchored into the ground and kind of throwing the club. So what that would kind of look like is something like this, where I'm not shifting my weight. I keep my trail leg anchored into the ground, and I just throw the club in front of my body, and then I'm not really going to get into a full finish when I do that. When I get a good weight shift and push into, get into the ground and start to open up my body and get off my trail foot, that's going to allow me to have my momentum come all the way around and get into a full finish there. So that's what I would look at. I'd make sure that you're getting a good shift to your lead side. You're shifting your weight to your lead side. And then you're allowing this foot, because some people shift their weight to their lead side, but then they still keep that foot on the ground, right? And they kind of end up kind of like that. So if you keep your heel on the ground, your back heel on the ground, it's basically going to act as an anchor, kind of for your finish. It's going to stop your hips, and that's going to kind of stop your finish. It's going to be hard to come all the way around. So what we want to do is get the hips coming all the way around, get the chest coming all the way around, get the arms and the club coming all the way around into that full finish. So if you're struggling with the weight shift, one of the best drills out there, one of my favorite ones out there, is called the step drill. And basically what you're doing, because what a lot of people don't realize is we actually want to start getting our shift to our lead side before you complete the backswing. So they've actually measured lots and lots of tour players on these pressure mats, and it's a mat that has thousands of sensors in it, and it measures the pressure that you're putting into it with your feet. So they measured many players, hundreds of players, and they found that at address, most tour players are going to be about 50-50, pretty balanced. There's a hair on the average. There's a hair more on the lead side. We won't get into why that is, but for the most part, very, very balanced. And then as they start the backswing, they start loading and putting pressure into this trail foot right away. This is where I see a lot of amateur golfers, not doing. I see a lot of amateur golfers not doing. They don't actually start loading up until they get up here. So they kind of start all arms, and then they get up here, and then they load up. Well, by the time you get up here, you should be shifting, right? So if you're struggling with getting that proper weight shift, what you need to do is get that pressure loading into the trail side right away. As soon as this club starts going back, I mean, I would almost use the loading as a trigger for the swing to feel like you're starting the backswing. Get that loading up happening right away. And then as you get into about right in this area, that's when you're peaking your pressure. So we're about 50-50 at address, and then we get up to about in this area and we're peaking. We're going to be about 75-80% of the total pressure is going to be in this trail foot here. And you're kind of driving into your heel as you're pushing your hip back. And then as we get from here to the top of the swing, that's when we're actually going to start to recenter. And at the top of the swing, you're going to be about 50-50 again. So again, I'm going here, loading up, loading up, loading up. I'm peaking. Now I'm recentering, right? And I'm about 50-50 as I get right in this area at the top of the swing. Now, as I come into impact, I want to be about 75-80% pressure on this lead leg. So I've recentered and I'm continuing to get my momentum moving here. And I'm pushing into the ground with my lead leg and I'm driving. I'm putting about 75-80% here. And then when I get into the full finish, now I'm going to be about 90% in that lead foot. So that's kind of what you want to think about. Now, a great drill to work on this is the step drill. And what you do in the step drill is you start with your feet together, right? Start with your feet together. And you start bringing this club back and loading up right away, pushing off of that trail leg. So as soon as this club starts going back, you want to start pushing forward. So this is forcing you, one, to exaggerate the loading up, right? Because typically, like I said, in amateur players, they don't load up at all. They just kind of lift and turn the body, and they don't load into that trail foot. They don't put pressure into that trail foot. So what this does is this gets your lead foot off the ground. So you're forcing yourself to put all your pressure into that trail foot. So it's giving you that sensation. And that's also exaggerating the shift happening a lot earlier. It's happening right away, right at the start of the backswing. Now, in reality, we want that to be happening right here in the swing. But if you're someone who's not doing it until you're not loading up here and then you're not shifting your weight till the downswing, this is a great exaggeration. Now, it's going to feel probably crazy awkward for you at first, but this is how any athletic motion is. If you think about a baseball pitcher, their arm goes this way, right, as their body goes that way, and then they throw it. It's the same thing. It's the same kind of athletic movement you want in the golf swing. As this club's going back, you want to be going forward and loading and then letting it go. That's the same thing that we want in basically any athletic motion. So we're going to go up to the top. Let's feel our body going forward, and then we're going to get that foot in the ground and then come all the way through into the full finish. So I would do that without a golf ball at first, and then nice and slow, go about 50% speed, and then start to really, really build up the speed. And as you're building up the speed and you get the timing of this down, you're going to feel how powerful this can be. And this is a big reason. This is a part of our 20-minute distance fix course. This is what we call the sumo step drill in the 20-minute distance fix course that's available as part of your All Access member. This is the membership. This is the best distance course we have out there. So if you're struggling to finish your swing, you're struggling with speed and distance, you're struggling with your weight shift, that sumo step drill from the 20-minute distance fix is going to be the best thing for you to do because it's going to nail all of those things. And it's going to help you to get to where you want to be. So if you want to check that out, click the instruction tab and then select the 20-minute distance fix. It's in week 1 of the 20-minute distance fix. Now, you may as well just go start in the 20-minute distance fix. You can do the sumo step drill first thing if you want, but I would do the quick start. I would do the catapult drill, which is the first drill in week 1, and I would do the sumo step, and then I would go into week 2, go through those drills. It's a 3-week program. I'm telling you, if you're looking to gain distance, it's really, really important to do that for sure because it's going to help you to play much, much better golf. All right, so let's keep going here. So Greg T says, hi Q, on the backswing, does your forearms or wrists rotate? If I do this, my right elbow does not fly away and I do not cross the line at the top of my backswing. So it can. Typically, there's going to be a little bit of rotation. An example of a tour player that in the start of the backswing doesn't have a lot of rotation of the forearms would be like a Matt Wolff, right? So if you're familiar with Matt Wolff, he's got kind of this crazy kind of loopy swing, So if I don't have any forearm rotation, my backswing looks like this, right? So now I add forearm rotation like you see in most players, right? And it's a little bit. Now, what we don't want is a lot of excessive arm rotation, because that if we have a lot of excessive forearm rotation, see what happens to that face? That club face gets wide open. Let me do this with a tennis racket because I think it's going to be a lot easier for you to see. So if I set up here, if I really roll my forearms, look where the face gets. The face gets very, very open. So now I'm going to have to really do a lot in my downswing. I'm going to have to roll my forearms even harder in the downswing to get that club face squared up, right? So typically we don't want to be doing that. I don't like to see it as much. It doesn't mean that you cannot be a great ball striker and do that. You know, someone that let's see here, who has a lot of forearm rotation? I would say Webb Simpson, I believe, has quite a bit of forearm rotation. Excellent ball striker, right? He gets that, but he gets quite a bit of forearm rotation, and you just have to match that in the downswing. You just have to do a lot more. Now that can absolutely be functional for you, but typically what I like to see is less forearm rotation and more of the wrist bending back, the trail wrist going into extension, right? So if I have less forearm rotation, so less of this and more just a little bit of extension, right? Or just a little bit of rotation and then extension of the trail wrist, which is this movement, right? That's going to get me into a pretty good position here at the top, right? So I have a little bit, you know, if I didn't have any at all, that would look like this, right? So I have a little bit that's going to get me on plane at the top, and that's going to get me in a good position with this club face and allow me to rotate into impact. But there's going to be less, right? There's going to be, I'm not going to have a lot of this through impact. It's going to be more that through impact, right? So it doesn't mean you can't be functional. You know, if you look at, you know, a lot of players, they have a lot of forearm roll through impact. You look at like a Phil Mickelson, a lot of forearm roll through impact. Phil Mickelson has excellent hands, right? Which, you know, makes it easier for him to do that. He's very, very highly skilled. If you're someone who's not very highly skilled, typically it's going to be better to have less forearm rotation, right? It's going to be more keeping that face square a lot more throughout the swing. It's typically going to be better. Like I said, there's a lot of ways to do it. You got to find what works best for you. But whatever you do in the backswing, you have to do more in the downswing. The reason why you have to do more in the downswing is that when you're not in the same position at impact as you are at address, right? So at address, your whole body is squared up, right? And your arms are kind of hanging down like this, nice and relaxed. This is how you want to be. At impact, the shaft should be leaning forward, ideally, right? And when you have the shaft leaning forward more, you have to close the face a little bit, because leaning the shaft forward opens the face. So we have to close the face more to, you know, by using our wrist angles or our forearm rotation to get that squared up. So if you open the face a lot in the backswing, it can be very, very difficult to get that nice and squared up at impact, because there's just more you have to do, right? And a lot of times if you open that a lot in the backswing, you're going to release early, right, to be able to close it, because just like leaning the shaft forward opens the face, leaning the shaft this way closes the face. So that would be an early release. So if you're scooping, releasing early a lot, it might be from rolling the face open too much, rolling the forearms open too much, because it's just hard for you to do a lot more in the downswing. So whatever you do in the backswing, you actually have to do more in the downswing in order to get into a good impact position. Now you don't have to, but and hit it functionally, but if you do the same amount if you're like this at address and you do the same amount in the backswing as you do and you do the same amount in the downswing, then you're going to end up with kind of a flippy, typically kind of scoopy kind of release. Now that's functional. It's not the most efficient way to hit the golf ball, but it can absolutely be functional. You can hit good golf shots. They're just going to be, you're just going to be a little bit less consistent. You're going to typically struggle with some ground contact at times. You're going to add loft, so you're going to not hit the ball. You're not going to compress the golf ball as much. So that's basically, you know, what it comes down to there. So Ali S says, what are your thoughts on using 64 degree? To me, it's not my preference. There's definitely some players that like it. So I like a 58 degree. That's kind of what I like. I found that that's what gives me a good amount of spin. So there's actually something that's called spin loft mountain. So earlier I talked about, how I believe I'm not sure if it was Ali that asked about the how to get spin question, or Ali. I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce your name. Sorry about that. But I would mention that you want to use loft, right? Well, there is such thing as too much loft, and you get something that's called spin loft mountain. So basically, what that means is that you get so much loft on the face that the club face doesn't really grab the ball. There's not enough friction there to give it spin, right? So that can happen as well. So 64 degrees a lot of times can add too much loft and make the ball kind of skid on the face and not really grab the ball. So you kind of just have to experiment with, it might be good to get a wedge fitting to find out what works best for you. Also, the higher loft you use, it's going to be the higher degree of difficulty, the harder you have to swing, right? So if you if you're hitting a 64 degree and you blade one, right, because you have to hit it harder, it's because it has more loft, you have to, give the club more energy to get it to go where it needs to go. That energy, if it's a blade or something like that, is going to be, it's going to hurt a lot more, right? You're going to hit it way over the green or things like that. So some things to keep in mind there. 64 degree can be fine. I know Phil Mickelson uses a 64 degree, but you really have to. It's typically not going to be the best for amateur golfers. I probably wouldn't go higher than a 60. I think most amateur golfers are going to do better with any a 56 to 58 kind of range. A 60 could be fine as well, but depending on your skill level. And, if you're having trouble getting spin on the ball, 64 degrees probably not the answer. I would start out with something like a 56 or 58 or maybe a 60 and get to where you're comfortable with it. Because like I said, it's just going to be more difficult. And your mistakes are going to be multiplied more with a 64 degree versus like a 56 degree. So George A says R100 to 30-yard wedges a body only swing. No. I mean, imagine if you used only your body, that swing would look like this, right? So it's not a body only swing. You're elevating the arms. There's typically going to be some wrist hinge, especially with the longer kind of wedge shots. There's going to be some wrist hinge there, right? So it's definitely not. Now you're going to be more successful if you have a body driven kind of a wedge kind of swing. So you use your pivot, right? You're using your pivot and things like that. There's not going to be a ton of lag typically in these kinds of swings because you're not going for speed, right? And you're not trying to super de-loft it. And with less speed, it's going to be easier to de-loft it. So I would say no, it's not a body only swing, but best pitchers and chippers of the ball, especially in that distance, are going to have a body driven kind of swing. So they're going to be using their pivot, opening their body and elevating their arms, a little bit of wrist hinge, and basically letting everything kind of come through together using the body. But it's not body only, that's for sure. Now you may need to feel like that, right? If you're someone who's really breaking down the arms and hinging the wrists a lot, you're kind of lifting it up and kind of swinging like that. You may need to feel like it's only the body that's driving the swing. That would be called adjusting your feel to get the desired result. That doesn't mean it's the reality, but that may be what you need to feel to get better results eventually. So Greg G says, I'm working on having a lower angle of attack. Seems to address if my hands are lower. I do have much better than if my hands are higher. Video shows that my backswing is more upright which allows me to drop the club easier and get the lower plane. When my hands are higher, I'm flatter. And the best I do is to maintain the swing plane. And many times I get steeper. Does this make sense? Yes. So if you are trying to lower your angle of attack, meaning you're trying to come in more shallow with the golf ball, and just for those of you who aren't familiar, angle of attack is the up and down movement of the club head into impact. So this would be, if you're coming into impact and it's like this would be a steep angle of attack. That I would consider that to be high. If we're coming in more level like this would be very, very shallow angle of attack. That would be kind of getting it close to zero. And then this would be kind of an upward angle of attack. Typically, we can only do that with the driver to have an upward angle of attack or shots that are teed up because the ground's in the way. We have to hit down on the ball a little bit off of the turf. So just to give you a general idea, your average tour player is going to be with a 4-iron, they're going to be about 4 degrees down, which may seem like maybe a lot to some people, but it's actually still very, very shallow. So if you think about a clock, 1 minute on a clock, is on an analog clock is 6 degrees. So it's less than a 1 minute that you're hitting down on it. Now, as you go down through the bag into the wedges, you're going to be moving into, like a pitching wedge is like 6 degrees down, average on tour. You get into the wedges, you're looking at, like your 56 degree, 60 degree, things like that. You're looking at 7, 8 degrees down. Then as you move up through the bag from a 7-iron, you're going to come in more shallower. That's by virtue of the club being longer, creating a bigger circle, a bigger radius. And then also the ball position typically moves a little bit more forward with those clubs. So you're going to see the angle of attack get a little bit more shallower. So like with a 3-wood, you're probably going to see an angle of attack that's more like 2.5 degrees down. Still down a little bit to make sure that you're making ball first contact, but a little bit more shallow than the shorter and more lofty clubs. So not sure exactly what angle of attack you are going for, but what you're saying makes sense. When you swing more from the inside, that moves the low point of your swing, right? It moves the low point of your swing back. So the low point of your swing is where the club comes down, reaches the lowest point, and then starts to work up. So if I swing a lot into out, that's typically going to shallow my angle of attack because my low point of my swing is moving away from the target. When I swing more over the top, right, my path is out to in, my low point's moving toward the target. I'm typically going to have a steeper angle of attack when I do that. So getting, if before you brought the club inside and then it made you come down steep in the downswing, that would make sense that would have a steeper angle attack. And then feeling like you're getting more upright and then dropping it down, coming more from the inside, that's going to shallow out that angle of attack for sure. Now, there's lots of things that can control that angle of attack and make that go up and down. The release is one of them. One other big one, and one that you may want to look at, Greg, is our compression line, because that also can have a big influence on low point. So for those of you who are not familiar with what the compression line is, this is one of the pieces of the Top Speed Golf system. And what we do to measure the compression line is we pause the swing at impact. And when we're looking from face on like this, we draw a line from the ankle, hip, and shoulder. And what we would like to see there is we'd like to see that in a nice straight line. So we don't want to see it like this, where we're very, very bumped out, the hips very, very bumped out. And we don't want to see it where the hips, you're more like this, where it's very, very bumped in. When we look at the best players in the world, typically that's all in a nice straight line there. And it's also typically just slightly angled away from the target. So if you're coming into contact and you're more like this with your compression line, leaning toward the target, that's going to promote a steeper angle of attack. And if you're very much angled away, that can promote a shallower angle attack or even an upward angle of attack, which we wouldn't want with shots off the ground. So we want to find that happy medium that gets you, typically 1 to 3 degrees angled away is going to be a happy medium. Like I said, there's lots of factors that go into controlling that. but that's about where you want to be. So if you'd like to work on your compression line, if some of you are coming in very, very steeply into the golf ball, or hitting up on the golf ball, not taking divots, that's probably more of a common problem than the steep angle attack. A bigger problem that I hear is where people talk about they're not taking any divots. They chunk a lot of shots. They thin a lot of shots. It's most likely because your compression line is probably too far angled away. And that's one of the biggest pieces of the top speed golf system. So if you want to check that out, click the house icon. That'll take you to the homepage. If you scroll down the homepage, you'll see a list of all the courses that we offer. If you scroll down on that list, you'll see the compression line that I'm talking about. You can also get to it by selecting the instruction tab at the top of the screen there. That will expand a menu, and then you can click the top speed golf system and click the compression line from there. All right, so let's keep moving here. Greg G goes on to say, I'm very comfortable with a good bit of spine tilt, i.e. away from the target with the driver. Should I reduce this from the driver to a wedge? If so, how much should I have with a short iron? So basically, for me, and I think for most people, the easiest way to do this is kind of naturally. So what you want to do is make sure that at address, typically your knees, your hips, and your shoulders are going to be square. So the only way you can really get your spine angle to be, vertical is to have your shoulders kind of open, right? So if you look here, I'm going to have my spine angle, from my belt buckle to my shirt buttons here in the middle of my sternum. I'm going to have that straight up and down. And if you look at it from this angle, you're going to see that my shoulders are open, right? My shoulders are pointed off that way. So in order for me to square that up, when I square that up, now all of a sudden I'm in my spine tilt. I'm in my perfect spine tilt. So with a wedge, right, if I'm letting my arms kind of hang straight down in front of me, just kind of be nice and relaxed and hanging straight down, and I'm holding the club there, then I'm going to have a little bit of spine tilt. If I have my driver, and because my ball position is more forward, right, my arms, my hands are going to be more to the left of my body a little bit, which means I have to reach more with my trail hand, which means in order for my body to be square, my shoulders to be square, my hips to be square, and my knees to be square, I have to have more tilt. And this also promotes better things to happen with the driver. It allows you to hit more up on the golf ball, which is the reason why you play it more forward to begin with, because you can hit it off of a tee. So naturally for me, because of my hand position, right, I'm going to have more tilt. And as I go through my bag and my ball position changes, my hand position kind of changes. And since I play a wedge, more in the middle of my stance, my hands are going to be more in the middle of my stance, which means I have less reach with my trail hand, which means I have less spine tilt here. So that's the way I'd recommend it. You're not, I could tell you, hey, you want to have 8-10 degrees of spine tilt with the driver, and then you want to have with the wedge, you want to have like 5 degrees. I could tell you that, but you're not going to be able to go out onto the course and be like, okay, there's 5 degrees, there's 10 degrees. You're not likely going to have that spatial awareness to do that. So what I would just try to do is dictate it by where your arms are at, right? It's going to happen naturally if your body is squared up. If you're not squared up, if you're opening up your body, that's how you get the spine tilt to be vertical, then that's where you're going to run into issues. So if you get to where everything's nice and squared up, shoulders, hips, knees, everything's nice and squared up at address, perpendicular to or actually parallel to your target line, then you're going to get, you're going to naturally have more spine tilt or less spine tilt, depending on the club. So Rick J says, hi, I have done the power turn series, but now find myself stuck on the right side and unable to get to the left side effectively. Any advice? What I'd recommend doing is working through the stop chunking and topping course. I talked about earlier about some great weight shift drills, but what that stop chunking and topping course is all about, it's about loading up properly. and getting to your lead side properly. So if you're having trouble getting off of your trail side, it's more likely because you're not really loading up soon enough or not at all. And then you're having a hard time getting to your lead side. I would also maybe look at your spine angle. If you get your spine angle leaning toward the target at the top, you're going to tend to fall away in the downswing and stay on your trail side. So what I would look at your spine angle as well. Make sure that you're nice and angled away. Stay nice and loaded up, angled away at the top, and then you get that good weight shift to get to your lead side. Those would be things that I would look at in your swing. All right, so let's keep going here. Steve A says, how do you ensure that your grip is consistent and same each time you hit a shot? Seems like can vary a little bit and cause inconsistent flight. Would like to tighten that up as much as possible. Practice. What I'd recommend doing, walking around the house, I would practice taking a grip and just taking a grip the right way. And eventually, over time, it's going to become second nature to you. Just like you're training anything in your swing, it takes practice, it takes repetition, and doing it right over and over and over again until it just becomes second nature, right? So if you imagine typing, right? When you were learning how to type, you were pointing and pecking. You didn't know where all the letters were on the keyboard. Then you started memorizing those. You're getting faster. Then you learned how to put your fingers on the keyboard. And you learned that all those fingers had an individual job. And eventually you got to the point to where you were going like this to you're just looking at the screen and typing at a quick pace. And your fingers just automatically do it. You don't even really have to think about it. So that's what you have to kind of work through with the grip. It takes time, repetition, and then eventually, that's just going to be, you're just going to grab the club instinctually every single time. When I started playing golf, I had played Little League Baseball for many, many years before I even, I say many years, and probably like 5 years. Before I played any golf. The first time I grabbed a golf club, I grabbed a golf club just like this, just like you would a baseball bat. Because instinctually, that's what I knew how to do. And then I had to learn, okay, this isn't how you grab, a golf club. My dad taught me the proper grip. And it took, I still wanted to grab the club like this, but it took a lot of time and repetition for me to eventually, I just do it automatically now. Funny story, I played softball in a softball league several years ago, and I hadn't swung a bat of any kind in a long time. And the first time I grabbed it and held it like a golf club because that's what came natural to me. I had to actually kind of make myself hold it like a baseball bat. So, it just takes some time and repetition to get that in. All right, so. Jim S says, using a putting alignment mirror, my eye line varies with my weight from the balls of my feet to my heels. Weight on the balls of my feet, the putter tends to move away to the outside. Thoughts on setting up the same way each time? Again, it's just like the grip. You're just going to you have to go through stages of learning. All right, so there's 4 stages of learning. The first stage is that you're unaware that there's any issue. So before you even had the putting mirror, you had no idea that your eyes in alignment were way off, right? You didn't even know that could be even an issue. And then you got the putting mirror, and you moved into the second stage, which was you became aware, right? So now you're aware that your eye lines are off, and so on and so forth. And those of you who aren't familiar, I think I actually have one. I do have one sitting here. So I believe this is what Jim's talking about. It's just a mirror that you use. It's got some lines on it. And ideally, when you sit this down, I use it for several things. It's got some holes in it that you can put some tees into and do kind of like a gate drill to make sure you're hitting it in the center of the face. So you can put a tee here and here and through it, and you can make sure that you're kind of hitting through those tees. If you hit a tee, it means, if you hit this outside tee, it means that you're kind of heeling the putter. If you hit this inside tee, it means that you're towing the putter, right? So you place the ball in there like this, and then you can kind of see where your eyes are. Now, generally what I would like to see for your eyes is I'd like to see them be on this, basically right over the ball or inside the ball, a couple inches, somewhere in there. If we're way over the ball like this and we're outside of this middle line here, then we're kind of looking back at the ball than at the target. If we're kind of behind it like this, we're kind of looking at, out toward the ball and out toward the target, and it just makes things a little bit easier to see the line and things like that. Things get less skewed if you do that. So now I got to remember exactly what you're asking. Okay, yeah. So what you have to work through the stages of learning, right? So you became aware, or you weren't aware, you became aware. That's the second stage. And the second stage is also where you become aware, but you're not quite sure how to change it or what to do. So now you're kind of figuring out weight in the toes, weight in the heels. That's helping me to kind of move, maybe more bent over, less bent over, longer arms, shorter arms. These are all things that can kind of help you change, get in that eye line where you want to be. Now, you want to move into eventually the third stage, which is called conscious competence. And what this means is that you are aware, right? You're able to do it, but you have to think about it in order to do it, right? And you stay in this stage for a long time. So first stage is unconscious incompetence, you're unaware. Second stage is conscious incompetence, you're aware, but you're not quite sure what to do, right, to fix it. Third stage is conscious competence, where you are able to do it now, but you have to think about it. You have to consciously have a thought to make it happen. Otherwise, you may not do it. And eventually, you do that long enough where you think about it, that it becomes second nature, and it becomes weird to do anything else, right? It's like gripping the golf club. For those of you who've been playing for a long time, you know how to grip the golf club. If you gripped it like a baseball bat, that would feel weird. You do this automatically every single time if you've been playing golf for a long time. So it's the same thing whenever you're trying to change anything in your golf swing. You have to go through the stages. In order for it to stick, you have to go through the stages. Otherwise, you may think about it, and then the moment you stop thinking about it, right, and you haven't, gone to that fourth stage, well, then you're going to go back to doing what you used to do or what comes more natural to you, right? So you have to work through it. You're going to have to think about it until eventually, when you set it to the ball, you're doing it automatically without any thought. So that's the fourth stage, which is unconscious competence. This is where you're able to do it automatically, unconsciously. You don't even have to think about it. Like walking, for example, that's not something you really have to think about, how each leg moves a certain amount. This heel goes up and things like that. When you're learning to walk, you probably have to kind of work through those things, right? But it's been so long that that's just automatic to you. So that's how you have to work through anything, whether it's getting your putting eye line right, your grip, the stable fluid spine, any of the pieces of the Top Speed Golf system. You have to work through those stages of learning. Otherwise, it's not going to stick. That's why we tell you to do thousands of reps, right? We don't tell you to do thousands of reps just because, hey, you need to do thousands of reps. There's a reason for it. The reason is that it takes that time. We call it getting it ingrained, that it takes that time to get to doing it the right way, to where doing it any other way feels awkward, weird, unnatural. So you take the way that feels comfortable, right? So that's basically the stages that you have to work through. So Gufran A says, at what level in downswing you twist the club to close the face so that you square the face at impact to avoid open face at impact and avoid slice? I would try to do it as soon as possible. That's what we talk about in the move course, is as we're starting down, we want to get that feeling of closing the face as soon as possible. So I would try to do it right away in the downswing. And that's the tennis racket drill. If you're not familiar with what the move is, we're talking about getting this club shallowed out and getting this club face square earlier in the swing. What we actually do in the move is we try to get you to over shallow it and get the face actually closed. So that way you're swinging too much into out and the face is too close and you hit big hooks at first. That's what we're trying to get you to. And then once you get there, then you can start to ease off of it a little bit. It's going to be so much easier for you to exaggerate those pieces, get the club really shallowed out, get the face really, really squared up when you're coming down, or really closed coming down. It's going to get you much easier to do that than to try to do it a little bit, because your progression is going to go a lot faster if you do it that way. So that's really how you want to do it. You want to do it, overdo it, and then ease off of it instead of just chipping away at it. So I would just try to do it as soon as possible in the start of the downswing. The best drill for that, I would say, is a tennis racket drill from the move course. If you want to use this tennis racket drill, and the reason why the tennis racket drill is really good, and you don't have to use a tennis racket to do this drill, but it's very, it's very helpful for the visualization of what you're trying to do. So when you're using a club, this club face, it's pretty small, and it also has loft on it. So it's not pointing in the exact direction that you're trying to get the face to point, right? It's pointing in that direction, but it's also pointing in the direction of the loft, right? Whereas this has no loft on it, and the strings are huge, so it gives you a very, very good indication of where the face is pointing, and so on and so forth. So what we do in the tennis racket drill is we go up here, and we try to get the strings to point at the sky, and at the same time, point kind of back behind you. So you're doing a turning of the doorknob kind of move with the wrists. So the forearms and the elbows are kind of doing a turning of the doorknob. That's shallowing the club. And then they're also doing a move which is bowing of the lead wrist, bending back of the trail wrist. This is closing the face. This is what the tour players do to get that club face closed. So that's what we're trying to do in the start of the downswing, is we're trying to get that move happening. And if you get that move happening, now we can stay in our posture and just rotate into the ball. Whereas if we have this face open, we have this club steep, we're going to have to make compensations later to get that club on plane and to square it up. And that's typically going to involve standing up and releasing the club face early to get it to square up. So if you're struggling with that, the move may be a good course for you. To get to the move course, click the instruction tab, then click the Top Speed Golf System, then click the move from there. All right, so let's get a few more here. So Darren S. says, when you shift your weight to the left side at the start of the downswing, I lose the spine tilt and thoughts to use to keep my tilt. It sounds like you're shifting your weight with your upper body instead of your lower body, right? So we want to get here and we want to shift our weight like this. We don't want to get up here and then shift our weight like that. So it'd be hard to say without seeing your swing, but we want to shift our weight with our lower body, not with our upper body. That's most likely what's going on there. So use your legs to shift your weight. Don't try to use the momentum of your shoulders and your head to make it happen. Thomas S. says, any thoughts or any swing thought or drill you'd recommend if I'm struggling with moving my right shoulder out in an over the top move? Maybe a swing thought, much better after instructional drills, but still cutting across the ball 99% of the time, even though focusing on bottom left of ball. So what I'd recommend as far as a drill is concerned is to, I don't have it in here. Actually, you know what? I'll be right back because I made a contraption and I'll show you. I think I have it in my garage. All right, so I got the contraption that I made here. So what I'd recommend doing is alignment stick. All right, so I have an alignment stick here. I got a pool noodle, right? And I also have a block of wood. If you're working on this indoors or off of a mat, or basically somewhere where you can't stick this alignment stick into the ground, then something like a heavier block of wood with a little hole drilled into it. I think it was a 3/8 bit that I used. It's about the same size as my alignment stick here, and that just slides right in there and holds it vertically. So what I did is I took this and I put a hole in, I poked a hole in my pool noodle here, and I just slide that right down the stick. So now I'm going to do is I'm going to slide this over here so you can kind of see what's going on. What I'm going to do is when I set up to my ball here, I'm going to have this kind of going down my hands. So where my hands are at address, I want that to be basically right in line with that. And what this does is this forces you to swing that club from the inside. If you swing over the top, you'll hit this thing, right? Or you'll miss it over the top. So you want to get this. This is going to be a good visual to help you to get that to work underneath like that. So a couple bucks, at a home improvement store can get you something like that. Now, things that I would look at are your spine angle, right? So you want to make sure that you're nice and angled the way I dress. Now, at the top of the swing, if your spine angle is leaning toward the target, you don't have any space to swing the club from the inside. And you're typically going to have your elbow and your shoulder work out over the top. So more than likely, your spine angle is like this at the top, and you need to get your spine angle more angled away, right? So if I get it more angled away, that's going to make it so much easier to get this club to work from the inside. The other thing that I would look at is your elbow motion, your shoulder and elbow motion. You can't have this kind of working back behind you, your elbow, otherwise it's going to be over the top. So you need to feel like your elbow works inside like this, and that gets the club to work from the inside. You also want to feel like your right wrist, here your trail wrist, is what's called supinating, which is outward rotation. So my forearms, almost like you're twisting, and this is what we talked about earlier with the move. I'm turning a doorknob to the right. So if I have the club at the top here, and I turn the doorknob to the right, look where it puts the club. It puts the club way, way behind me. So that motion is what you want, and you want that motion to get the club really, really behind you. So it may be beneficial for you to do some one-arm swings where you go up to the top and then feel that club working behind you and swinging from the inside, right? The last thing that I would look at is your wrist movements, right? So what we want to have at the top of the swing is we want to have what's called wrist extension. So knuckles back, kind of bending toward your elbow. So if I have the club flat at the top, or if I have my wrist flat at the top, my trail wrist, what I'm typically going to do is I'm going to bring it out like this, right? Because that club face is very, very open at the top. So instinctually, most people are going to try to swing left to get that face kind of close. Because swinging left helps you close the face, right? So what we want to do is we want to have that extension, right, to help me get the club more behind me, and then also get that club face closed. If I have, if I hold it like this, if I cup it, here, I'll hold it like this. If I cup my wrist like that, you can see that opens. If I bend it back, extension, that closes it. So that's going to make me more instinctually swing from the inside. So that's what I'd recommend doing. Use this as some feedback to tell you. You want to have feedback. Don't go out there and just aimlessly, not necessarily aimlessly, but don't go out to the range and just try not to swing over the top, because you're more than likely just going to go out and swing over the top. You need to have a feedback mechanism, whether you're looking at it on video or using something like this, or both. I'd recommend both. Do this most of the time. Physical feedback, instant feedback. That's why this is really great. Instant feedback and spot check with the video, every now and then to make sure that you're swinging from the inside. So that's what I would do. I just kind of look at those pieces, miss the noodle from the inside, and do a lot of it. Get to where it would feel crazy, weird, awkward to do the opposite, to do what you're doing right now. Just takes a lot of time and repetition. It's not going to happen overnight in one range session. It's not going to take, I know you kind of asked for a swing thought. It's not going to be just a swing thought that's just going to make it happen. It's going to take some time and some repetition, kind of like what I talked about, stages of learning. Tiger Woods, described the stages of learning very, very well in a quote they had. He said, first, I understand what I need to do. Then it looks better. Then it feels better. Then it performs better in practice. Then on the course, and then in a tournament. So that's the stages that you have to work through with anything that you're working on. So I'll answer a few more questions and then we will wrap up. So Ed D says, I don't get enough on the downswing, shifting right on the backswing. Is it a good idea to drill head, staying absolutely in place on backswing, the down and the left through swing? In the backswing, yeah, I would say that would be a pretty good feeling. But on the downswing, I would probably try to feel like your head's moving forward. Because if you feel like the head's staying absolutely still, you'll typically hang back. But again, your feel may be a little bit different than mine. If you feel like you're staying absolutely still and you shift your weight, then that's a good feeling for you. But if you look on and you're not shifting, then you may need to feel like your head's going way too far forward. You may need to feel like your head's going in front of your lead foot even though it really isn't. That may be what you need to feel like to get the results that you want. So Steve A says, thanks for your answer to my question. You have a gift for teaching. Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it, buddy. So Brian P says, thanks, Hugh. Exactly the grip info I was talking about. The amount of useful info that comes out of these office hour sessions is amazing. Thanks. Thanks, man. So one more question here from Jeffrey M says, in order to determine which parts of the game to work on, do you have any guidelines regarding greens regulation, putts, ups and downs, sand saves, driving accuracy? So what I would think about is, generally there's things in your game that are keeping you from playing better. There's usually a miss. So what I would try to think about is what's happening at impact on your drives, on your approach shots, whatever it might be. What's stopping you from playing your best golf, right? What's the big miss that's happening at impact? So is it because you're chunking all your shots? Is it because you're slicing all your shots? Is it because you're that information is useful. If you have a lot of greens in regulation, there are, typically, a scratch player is going to hit, 12, 13 greens in regulation. So if you're hitting that many and you're hitting that many greens, then there's a disconnect there. Now it could be that you're hitting a lot of greens, but your proximity to the hole is really far away. And because greens are these stats can be very misleading. So you don't want to rely entirely on just what you see on paper. You want to rely on what's actually happening. So like I said, greens in regulation, if you're hitting a lot of greens in regulation and you're not showing low enough scores, it's typically because your putting is bad and or your proximity to the hole is very far away, right? So you're not getting the ball close enough to the hole, and you're getting a lot of three putts because of that, right? So, outside, I think it's like 27 feet or something like that. Once a tour player hits 27 feet, they're more likely to three putt than one putt. So if you're outside of 30 feet all the time on all your putts, you're going to be way more likely, to three putt that, especially as an amateur player, to three putt that than to two putt that. Putts can be very misleading as well. Just like, if you hit a lot of greens in regulation and you have 36 putts, it may be that you are hitting the ball way too far away from the hole and you're two and three putting everything with an occasional one putt, right? If you're having trouble with ups and downs, right? It may not be that your iron game is bad or your driving game is bad, and you just have too many ups and downs that you have to get, and you're chipping from way off the green and things like that. So you have to look at what's actually happening in your golf game and then tackle a piece of that. For amateur players, what I tell them to work on is things that they enjoy. If you enjoy hitting your driver and a driver is a bad part of your game, then that would be a game that if you enjoy chipping and putting, right, and you enjoy practicing that more than anything else, and that's a part of your game that needs to be improved, then I would be doing that, right? So as long as you're striding toward improving something, I typically tell amateurs to practice what they enjoy doing, because that's really what it's all about. But if your goal is to get better, whether you hate practicing it or not, then I would do that. Like, I'm not a huge fan of practicing my iron shots. I'd much rather practice driving or my short game. But my iron game is probably the worst part of my game. So, it would behoove me, as far as lowering my scores, to work on that. But when I play right now, it's more for the enjoyment. When I practice, it's more for the enjoyment of what I'm doing. So you have to evaluate what your goals are and what you're trying to do to know what exactly you want to work on. So that's a great question, but it varies by the player, and it really, really just depends. But that information is good, but just understand that information can be very misleading if you're just looking at the black and white on paper. I would think about what's actually going on that's making you have poor greens in regulation or high greens in regulation and or high putts and high scores and so on and so forth. So, but anyway, thanks to everybody for joining me. We'll be back here tomorrow, Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern time. Everybody have a good rest of your day, and I'll talk to y'all next time.